So we have some holes in our boat, and we'd like to have less holes, or slightly cleaner holes.
We need cleaner holes.
I'm gonna make more holes, and then I'm gonna put a cover over those holes, and I'll make them disappear, and then we're gonna make more holes.
So what Logan is doing is drilling holes that are wider than the holes that we just drilled to mark out our edges for the plate that we're replacing. And those holes are also going to make sure that we have rounded corners, and then we're gonna draw lines in between the holes to cut with a zip disc.
That should make a really nice square piece with rounded corners.
That's the theory.
That is the theory.
I'm Taryn, this is Logan, and this is Max. Our life rarely goes as planned, and this story is no different. But we are determined to rebuild our beautiful steel boat, even stronger than she was before. And we're bringing you along with us. Last week we took off our steering pedestal and discovered that there was quite a bit of rust underneath, as well as that it was going to be best to change the material that was originally used for the pedestal to sit on. We did some cutting of things and placement of other things, and now here we are cutting out even more things. So initially I was going to template what we're cutting out with just a piece of cardboard over the hole, but Logan did a good enough job of cutting this piece that it's pretty much its own template right now off the bat. So I don't even have to template it, I just have the piece that he cut out, it's on the table. I've just got to put little round bits back in the corners to trace around the corners, and other than that it's ready to go, so that's awesome. Super time saver. So we're cutting this piece out of 3/16, which is like 4mm. Which is actually what the flooring or sole was built out of up there, but we didn't know. We thought it was thinner, but it's not. So it was 4mm, and it's still like it bowed a bit. So it's a good thing we're putting this extra plate on to try to give it extra strength. That's my job while Logan tries to finish the new plate that the pedestal is going to sit on.
We are going to try and fit the two plates that we're replacing for our pedestal. And it involves a lot of thinking, I think. It's a beautiful day today, so it's perfect for this, but we have to open up the tent and get the welder up onto the boat, cut holes in things.
Good, thanks. You text the other day? Yeah.
we need to bring the welder up here in order to do the welding up here because the cords are not long enough. But our conundrum is that there's not really anywhere that's wide enough at this end of the boat for the welder to like sit comfortably. Like you can see right there. Everywhere is just like slightly too narrow so that out of the 4 wheels there's always going to be at least 1 and sometimes 2 that are sitting lower or higher than the other ones. And ideally we'd actually have the welder like in the cockpit, but the crane that we've been using or that we are using, it doesn't extend long enough to safely get it into the cockpit, so we're just sticking it at the aft end, and that's as close as we're gonna get. So Logan just found a few pieces of wood that the welder's gonna actually sit on so that it can be on level ground and we don't have to worry about it falling over or rolling off or whatever. So we're about to do. So we've got the welder on the deck, but now the question is whether or not we actually have a long enough power cord to plug into the welder when it's this far back. Oh man.
That's gonna be close to where it's gonna go, but I'm worried more about lining it up this way. Keep the camera going?
It's up there.
Oh, hi camera. So that gives us our inch from where it was.
Yeah.
Nine 16ths. 23 and 9 16ths. Like that seems
Sweet.
to line up pretty. Yeah,
Pretty close.
really close.
Trying to decide what to measure off of was difficult because nothing on a boat is quite square, but we were happy with our final measurements being as close as we could get them. Not off by that much, I guess.
No, and it's like I have nothing really to go off of because the chamfer is different.
Right.
So it could be out by like an 8
Yeah.
or more.
Okay, so Logan has cut out the center of this plate, which looks really weird probably, but there's a good reason for it.
So basically, I followed this shape
Yeah.
when I cut that out, except for I left it in an inch. So what we're going to end up doing is, when we weld this plate down onto that, we'll weld all the way around the outside. And then from underneath, we'll weld the other plate to this plate all the way around the inside. And it just makes everything easier for lining up. Normally you would cut the hole the same size and weld this right to it, but it makes lining things up really difficult. So if we leave a little bit of a lip, what we're gonna do is tack this in place again, this plate, put this on top where we think it's gonna go, and we'll put the pedestal all back together with the wheel and then take the measurements from the wheel to make sure that it's square to the boat and centered, and then we'll tack this plate to that plate, pull it all out, and weld it all up on the bench.
Yeah, go through it.
It's not going to be exact, but got 13.5 on both.
Okay.
So that's pretty centered.
Alright, so you can see here, that's the final cut on this. So originally, this plate came back to like here. And because it came back to there, it cut through these holes about halfway. So that's why we had to take it off and retack it. So now Logan has gone to get a couple of pieces of steel just so we can stick this up on a couple of pieces of steel and weld underneath before we tack it in officially. But that's the almost finished product. So the plate's all tacked on, as you can see, and it's ready to be welded. I've also put the ceramic backing tiles all the way around that weld, so we should hopefully only have to weld it from the top, and that should make life a lot easier.
Actually, it's worked out really well. Really happy with how it's all fit. It doesn't look like a complicated piece, but with everything that's going on below decks, and the fact that the original plate we cut out was kind of bent, so like some of the edges didn't really line up very well, and it was very difficult to measure things off of. Now we just have to hope that we got it in there straight.
Or that there's enough play in the bolt holes to get the wheel straight again, if we didn't get it in straight.
Yeah, it looks pretty good. I haven't measured since we've welded, but it's probably going to move a little bit as we weld. Well, I don't know really.
It'll
Maybe.
probably move a little bit, but not much.
Yeah, it shouldn't move much. We could double check that right now before we get too far along here. Not that we can really do anything about it now, because this is all welded from the underside.
So yeah, we'd have to move the whole plate.
So we've got... Holy.
What?
That's bang on.
Eh,
That's actually better than
better than it was?
it was.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's so close. We'll definitely be able to line it up just with the play in the bolt holes, because they're a 1/16 of an inch larger than the actual bolts, so yeah,
Awesome.
that should work out really well.
Sweet.
Been prepping this for days. Well, cutting it out and building the plates and doing all the stuff, but
Yeah, it's taken a lot longer than expected, I think.
yeah, I thought realistically we could get this mostly done in a day.
Did you?
Like mostly done, maybe not welded, but tacked in place. But it's a lot of like tacking it in place, looking at everything from below and above, taking it all apart, going down, cutting out more, grinding everything up, bringing it back up, tacking it in place. Like,
Yeah.
over and over and over again.
And most of it's like a one-man job. Like, can't get two of us on the project.
Yeah.
So.
And then every time you go to tack it back in place, everything's got to be lined up again.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm really happy with this.
Alright, so this is almost done. There's just one more weld on the inside. Looks pretty good.
I'm feeling stoked about it. I'm really, really happy. I think it filled pretty well. Like, I could have ground a little bit more out of this side. You see how it's kind of, the weld's humped up here?
Yeah.
So I could have ground some more out of there, but where I had a gap, like that was a perfect gap. So I've completely filled that. So we'll have to check once we tear the
strips off the bottom.
strips off and look underneath to see if any areas need welding from underneath.
So what's the game plan with that weld? Are you gonna just kind of take the top off them and then fair them?
It'll be ground flat.
Flat? Okay.
Basically.
So yeah.
Like, if there's a little bit of a hump, I don't care, because it's got to be faired anyway, because the fairing is, like, it's not super thick here, but it's thick enough to
do a little bit?
Yeah.
So yeah, those welds really have to be fully penetrating then.
And then we'll put a proper fillet in here.
Right.
After, and like this will just kind of mold into the deck. It'll be like all of our other deck fittings.
Okay, it's time to pull off some of these tiles. Some of it, like you can see here, great penetration. That's pretty good, and then there's spots like this where there's like nothing coming through. And that is just because the gap was inconsistent. So that stuff's gonna have to be welded from underneath. Probably V'd out a little bit. And yeah, and because we're taking that weld off the top, especially, I think it's pretty important. Have really good strong penetration through most of that. So some of it is great, like again right there, it looks like there's a full weld almost on this side, even though it was only welded from one side. And without those tiles on there it would have been too much. We would have had crazy blow through, but with the tiles it was the perfect gap. And lots of it does not. So, and there's Logan. Hi Logan.
How does it look?
Some of it looks really good and some of it looks like there's definitely going to need to be more weld put on.
Shit.
Yeah, that will be done tomorrow, I guess.
Why?
It's like 6 o'clock almost.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
So we're trying to finish the welding in here. As you guys saw yesterday, we finished all the topside stuff. But now we got to do a little bit underneath because we didn't get full penetration all the way around, and also there's overlapping of plates that needs to be welded. Okay, so in order to do that, in order to get proper penetration, we've got to kind of V out some sections along the plate joint, and essentially what that's going to do is allow the weld to actually get in between the two plates. So because we're working inside the boat and there's a lot of wood and exposed stuff in here, we're trying to keep our sparks down as much as possible. So I'm using die grinders to do that, and I'm actually using two different die grinders. I have a pneumatic one, the one that got the metal in my eye, and then we've also got an electric one, a battery powered one. So I've also got to clean up a bunch of paint along the edge of this in order to just make sure that things don't light on fire and we don't get a bunch of porosity in the welds, because as the paint burns it contaminates the welds and we end up with porosity. So between those two grinders, hopefully I can get this thing cleaned up and we can get a better weld all the way along the bottom here. All right, well that was a lot more difficult than I'd hoped it would be. So even with the two different styles of die grinders, it was still really hard to get in there and actually do what I needed to do in a lot of it. So the issue in some spots is that the plates are too close together. So even with chamfering them, like V'ing them out so that they come together like this so that there's a bunch of space here for a weld, there still isn't much of a gap in between, and it's actually really hard to get the die grinder up there and control it to get a proper V in between. And I think what the issue is that Logan on the top, he V'd it out so that there should have been enough of a gap to do, like, to get penetration all the way around, but maybe in some spots there wasn't enough, or when it was being welded it pulled to one side and kind of closed the gap on us. So what we should have done probably is chamfered both sides of the plate that went in to begin with, and then there would have been more space, and if we had this issue then we wouldn't be trying to chamfer it now to get penetration with the weld. Okay, you can see there, that is the weld that he's put on. Welding overhead. Looks surprisingly good because usually overhead looks like garbage, so that's cool. And that should be more than enough to keep this strong. So you can see that's the weld he put on, and then beside that is the penetration with those tiles. So yeah, it's not perfect, but it should be enough. So that's the main thing. Well, it's the moment of truth. We're gonna try to put the pedestal back on and to see if we messed anything up or if it's actually gonna work as, you know, a steering column again. Here we go.
Yeah, it is a little, but it's really nothing.
No, I think it's fine.
Don't think I'd worry about that. Thankful lever.
Sweet.
We just I want to measure now that the wheel's tight, it's bolted on there. I want to measure to everything and see.
Make sure we're centered.
How centered it is, if at all.
The pedestal's back on. We seem to be pretty close to center. It's hard to tell because, you know, it's a boat, nothing's quite square.
Yeah.
But we're within 1/4 of an inch, which is more than acceptable. And that flex that we had in the floor seems to mostly be gone. So if we refund it back and forth, the floor is barely moving. So we think we've solved that problem as well. That's pretty exciting. That's like, we got it back in the right place. And we fixed both the problems that we had, which is rust and flexing in the floor. We mostly solved the one problem. We solved the rust issue. Mostly solved the flexing problem. I don't think it's going to get much better than that. Thanks so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. And an extra big shout out to our patrons for giving us that extra boost every week.